KRA is really a replacement of what we had in place with the Maryland Model for School Readiness. It builds on the MMSR in terms of an assessment construct that's different, but it comes from the same thinking that when we are looking at school readiness, we're looking at domains of learning, not just one particular domain, but several domains. And they include social foundations, language literacy, physical development, and early math. All 3,700 kindergarten teachers are administering it during that time frame, and they assess the skills and behaviors of the children as they come in. But the measure is on the skills that they bring to kindergarten. And the teacher uses this assessment with 3 types of assessment formats. The first one is observational rubrics. And I need to mention that the observational rubrics make about 50% of the assessment. Teachers were assessed on the content of the assessment, so they would have a better understanding of what is being assessed. And that speaks to the validity of the use of the assessment for teachers to have a good understanding as to how to administer it. There was a big discussion about going into this with standardized items, whether it's developmentally appropriate and whether it would just be a piece that would create some concerns in especially the early childhood community. But I think the advice that the assessment consultant gave us was where if you have a way to directly measure foundation skill, measure them directly. You can see for yourself what demonstrating, approaching, and emerging readiness are defined as, but it's very important that I want to point out that these are different nomenclature that we had with MMSR. The demonstrating readiness was this full readiness concept that we had in MMSR, and the emerging readiness was the developing readiness that we had in MMSR. So emerging readiness is now the new term used for children that come in with a lack or deficiency in some of the foundational skills and behaviors which need to be addressed when the kids come into kindergarten. That's the headline measure, if you will. The overall results. These are the new benchmarks that we're working with. And I've just come off, and that's why I was a little late, because Baltimore Sun had called and wanted to have some information for an article. And they asked, how come we have such difference in the results? And there are really 3 reasons. I mentioned that at the board too. The first one is that the MMSR and the KRA are aligned to do 2 different curricular frameworks or standards. The MMSR was aligned to the Maryland state curriculum, and the KRA is aligned to the Maryland college and career standards. Those 2 standards, K to 12, the state curriculum, as well as or compared to the Maryland College and Career Ready standards, is huge. The expectations that have been set within the new standards are considerably higher, and therefore it had its impact on the lower grades, including pre-K. And so that's the first difference. 12 years ago when we did the MMSR, we prepared them for the state curriculum. Now we're preparing for a new curriculum, which is at a higher level. It's more challenging. It's more challenging because it requires more for kids to think differently and to learn somewhat differently than what we had in our state curriculum. The second piece is the measures are different. The MMSR, as I just mentioned, was a measure that looked at 7 domains of learning and aggregated the information a little differently than the way we're doing it now with the KRA, which has 4 domains. And again, as I explained, it's a different assessment format. And then the third one which I find the most intriguing aspect of the big change, had to do with the whole standard setting process. And that has to do with a way in how you look at your results, your scores that come in, and where you set the cut scores. And that sounds a little technical, but what it does is the conversation about saying, what are the skills that the kids would need to come in to be prepared for that curricular level of learning in kindergarten, as teachers define it as part of their professional expertise. 25 teachers from Ohio and Maryland came together and worked on a shortened version of the KRA, I'll speak to that in a minute, and set those standards over 3 days. We're working now with a new benchmark, we're working new curricular framework, and I think what we're doing is we are now in the process of informing the early childhood community and also those that work in the lower grades as teachers that there is going to be a huge effort, must be a huge effort underway to turn the curve. Let's talk about predominant care. This is the prior care category. And we have, this may be hard to read, but you have it in front of you, of course. The largest group is pre-K. It's always been. Then we have the home and informal care group. And that is larger than what we had in the past. We had about 18, 19% before. Now it comes up 23%. And I had that number checked twice to see what we find in there, and that's how it turned out. Then childcare centers, Head Start. This is Head Start. A non-public nursery, and the childcare centers here. So this is the breakout in percentage of all the kids that have been included in this analysis for predominant care. This does not include the kids that are in dual settings, like in Head Start and in family childcare in the afternoon. There are pre-selected groups in here in terms of their enrollments, and that's mentioned here on the slide. Head Start and pre-K are almost exclusively from low-income families, and therefore that has an impact on the results for those groups. So if you're, for instance, an administrator for a local agency that's responsible for early childhood services, that data is going to report on your groups of kids in your jurisdiction and really should be informative in terms of what the next steps might be in your discussion with your key leaders in supporting children and improve the school readiness skills for those kids and what can be done. The data is meant, among other information, for early childhood councils to use the information. That's sort of a given because they went through the results-based accountability leadership program, any of those, and of course that's designed to work with performance measures, and the KRA is the one that those councils will be using. Now for families, we fell short a little bit this year because, again, for the standard setting, we didn't have the scores in time, and we had come down on the business rule for this year that we would send out the individual student records, and it was up to the teacher to share that with the parents. We felt that because of the delay of several months to have the information out for families, it might cause greater confusion than it would be helpful. I mean, I can say that the business community has always been interested in early childhood, and they like data. So we went to them, but it was your engagement to get us there, and there's something scheduled next week with that group and with foundations. And I think has made a difference, a huge difference in terms of resources and buy-in to our work. We have information about the assessment itself online. That's actually handled through CTE at Johns Hopkins. And Judy can get you, or Wendy, who is working from our office with all the councils, can get that out. The early learning assessment, that's the tool that I can see folks that work with 3 and 4-year-olds will be using. And so that is, as I said, last few months of development, and will be out this summer and fall for training. I have this thing analogy, it's a little phony, but it's a, you know, you have kids that go, I mean, it was high jump, you know, the high jump analogy. So, you know, a typical athlete might manage to get over 7 feet, right? So we have, over the last 13 years, we've practiced to get more kids over, you know, across the 7 feet height, you know. And so 8 out of 10 were doing it by the time we finished with all of that. Now we are raising it to 7.5 feet. And we find out that 5 of them can do it. So that's pretty good, but we want to get more kids to, you know, jump over that level. The data is one thing, but we wanted to make sure that it is, that there's a curricular alignment, a continuum in place from early childhood into the public schools. And so we will be developing professional development modules that can be used for pre-K and in K, and following or basing it on the guide that we just published. I didn't bring it with me, but it is the Guide to Early Childhood Pedagogy. It's a blue book, and it has, I believe, 8 chapters. And we wanted to develop modules that follow those chapters and unpack that and provide that information to, or disseminate it through the community. And we're just working on that for the rest of the year and probably into early next year to get those established and then being disseminated. It's worked very well for MMSR, and I believe it'll work